The next thing that we're going to talk about is intracellular junctions. Break the word down, you'll see what we're talking about. We're talking about how two cells, cellular, can connect to each other. Intercellular junction. There's three types. There's tight junctions, desmosomes, or anchor proteins, and gap junctions. All of these cells are connected to these types of junctions except for blood cells. Blood cells are the only one, red blood cells, white blood cells, that are supposed to float around and not connect to each other. All the other ones are supposed to connect to each other to form a tissue layer. And these tissues get to talk to each other and then, of course, share things like water and sugar and ions. And these junctions are due to specialized proteins. And these proteins are going to be the tight junction proteins, desmosome proteins, or gap junction proteins. So here's our first one. It's called the tight junction proteins. And it's basically telling you what it's doing. It's a junction that prevents the molecules from passing, and it keeps them sort of really closely knit. So you could see that here's that junction point, and if we blow that part up, you can see that it interlocks or sort of nets the two cells together. So it like knits them or kind of holds them together so they're stuck. So it prevents extracellular leaking. It really holds these cells together. Tight junctions. So you can see that they're holding them really tightly between the two. Our next one is going to be called desmosomes. You might have even heard them in other classes called anchor proteins. And you can see them right over here. And what they're doing is they're kind of like rivets that hold these cells together. And they allow for a little bit of pulling and stretching. So like skin and muscle have it for the obvious reasons. You could pull on your skin and they sort of snap back. You could see that these allow for a little bit of movement. If you think about these kind of like a hinge, they can kind of pull apart a tad, but then as soon as they're done, they sort of come back and flex back to where they need to be. And your skin is pliable that way. Your muscles really work on these sort of junctions as well. And our last one is called gap junctions. And these gap junctions are these little channels that you can see, these little holes from one cell to another. And what they do is they let small molecules pass from one to another. That's going to let them communicate or maybe even pass a message like move. So with muscles, we're going to see that they pass a protein from one channel to the other to allow them to move. Also, it allows them to share cytoplasmic liquid. So cytoplasmic liquid is that liquid that's inside the cell. And that means it can go from one cell to the next to the next. And that makes it so their water levels are balanced. And then ions and sugars and things like that can go through. And the other thing that we don't really think about is these cells do talk to each other. So if a hormone comes to one cell and says, hey, we need to do this, it basically relays that message to all the neighboring cells, and they all do the same thing at the same time. So here's the big overview with the pictures. Tight junctions are really to knit these two cells together. The next one, the desmosomes or anchor junctions, really allow them to be flexible and stretch and allow them to come back. And then the gap junctions, they're allowed to share things from one to the other. Let's cover glands as well in this video. Glands are basically cells or organs that secrete substances. And there's two types of glands. There's exocrine glands and endocrine glands. And most of these two we'll cover in Bio 202, especially endocrine glands. But exocrine glands are connected to the surface with a duct or a tube, so it allows things to kind of come out of this duct. And endocrine glands secrete hormones. And they go through the bloodstream, which is going to be like their highway, to go from one tissue type to another tissue type and communicate a message. So like a hormone that could go from your pancreas to your liver or kidney or other places to say that, hey, we have a lot of sugar or we need a lot of sugar. Some glands are mixed. some glands release these endocrine and exocrine glands, and they have a mixture of these two. So like the pancreas secretes digestive enzymes into the small intestines using a duct. So that would be like an exocrine gland. And it uses hormones in the bloodstream, so that would be an endocrine system. So in the blood, endocrine. If it's using the duct to squirt it into our small intestines, exocrine. Exocrine glands, they're going to be found in other places as well. Serous glands, they're secreted thin, watery secretions, so sweat, tears, digestive fluid, even milk are all going to be done through these glands or these ducts that are going to allow things to go through. We'll even find with oil, that'll be the same way. Mucus glands, they're going to secrete mucin, which is basically the precursor to mucus, and that's going to be in our nose, our reproductive tract, our respiratory tract. We don't think about a respiratory tract having mucus in it, but it does. It traps foreign bodies, and then basically we slowly try to move that mucus out, either by throwing it into our digestive system, sneezing it out, or coughing it out. And then cytokine glands, they release whole cells. So these are going to be like in our ovaries. They basically produce eggs, or sperm in the testes. They're going to eventually make sperm through these, and these are going to be whole cells that are going to be made. Those are going to be gametes. And then endocrine glands, this one is basically the whole synapses of 202, bio-202. They produce hormones that travel through the bloodstream and cause some response somewhere. So there could be hormones produced by the hypothalamus, and then the pituitary gland will actually release them. So the hypothalamus will say, hey, something's wrong with homeostasis. We need to do something about it. The pituitary gland will make hormones and release it through the bloodstream, and they'll basically affect all these other tissues. So they could produce a hormone to release, to go to the thyroid or the parathyroids to either get calcium from the blood or release calcium into the bones, one or the other. So it's either going to get calcium from the bones, or we'll tell them we have too much and put them into the bones. There could be some that'll go to the adrenal glands or the kidneys or the pancreas, and really I'm trying to summate 202 in like one slide, so I'm not going to do any more. But basically travels through the bloodstream, starts one thing here and affects another thing somewhere else, and that effect will kind of send a response back to the pituitary and the hypothalamus saying it's doing it. That's called that negative feedback response that we've talked about in the past.